So you've probably noticed by now that Publisher is all about working with objects. So text boxes, for example, would be objects. Logos or clip art or arrows and lines, those are all objects. And when you create a publication using one of the templates, you get a lot of these objects placed on the page for you. But what if you want to add your own? Well, there's a special toolbar for all of this. It's called the Objects Toolbar. And we're going to look at how we enable this now, and then we'll take a brief overview of each of the buttons on that bar. So let's begin a brand new publication here. If you don't have the Getting Started screen here on your screen, just go up to File, give it a click, choose New, and the Getting Started screen will appear for you. Alright, so all we're going to do is start with a blank page, so click Blank Page Sizes, and then you'll see a number of templates down below. I'm just going to scroll down here to my letter 8.5 by 11. So we'll give that a click and click Create. So here's our blank page, and now if we wanted to start from scratch, we could obviously in Publisher, and we want to add our own objects. So the Objects toolbar by default is enabled and shows up down the left-hand side of your screen over here. Now, if you want to make sure that it's enabled and it stays that way, there's a couple of ways to turn on or turn off the Objects toolbar. One way is just to go up here into an empty space next to any of your current toolbars that are enabled and right-click. If you see a check mark next to Objects, that means it is enabled and it's somewhere on your screen. Most likely, it's over there on the left. If I click on Objects right now, I'm going to turn it off, and you can see it does disappear from the left side of my screen. Another way is to go up to the View menu. If you click View and come down to Toolbars, you'll see the same list, and there's Objects there. To enable it, we click Objects and it's back. Now, like any toolbar, we can move this around when we get the four-sided arrow. If we wanted to float the Objects toolbar, we can drag it over here and you can see it's floating now. We can move it to the top if we prefer. We can size this. I'm going to just drag it, see if we can change the width. There we go. And now I'm just going to move it back to the left-hand side. You can see here it's to the right of my task pane, but if I go all the way to the left, it shows up there in its default location. Now, some of the buttons that we can use to insert objects into a publication. Well, right at the top, the one that's selected right now is the Select Objects button, and that's our mouse pointer. So this is what we use to actually click on objects to select them. So whether it's a text box or a piece of clip art, for example, with this mouse pointer, we can click on an object to select it, and then we can do things with that object, like resize and manipulate. The next button down, you can see as I hover over it, the quick tip says it's a text box, and this is what we use to insert a text box into a publication. So if I click on that and come into my blank page, notice that my mouse pointer's turned into a crosshair. So I can click and drag now to create a text box and predefine its size just by clicking and dragging. And then you can see I've got my flashing cursor on the inside so I can start typing text. The next one down is the table button, so we use this to insert a table. We will be doing this a little bit later on. If we click the Insert Table button and move over, it looks like the same pointer that we saw for inserting a text box. And the same thing happens. We can click and drag to create our table. When we release, the Create Table dialog box appears, and we will go into this in detail a little bit later on, so let's hit Cancel for now. The next one down looks familiar to you if you're used to Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. This is where you insert word art. So it's text, kind of like a text box, but it's going to have special effects. So very handy for titles and that kind of thing. Down below, picture frame. Now a picture frame can contain clip art. It can contain photographs, any kind of digital image, for example. So we use this button for inserting the frame that allows us to select the picture that will show up inside. Then we've got our line button. We click that. We can draw lines. We can click and drag across for a horizontal line. We can go back to the line button, click and drag straight down for a vertical line. So that would be handy for maybe in between columns of text, for example. If we wanted lines to have arrows on them, we can use the arrow button. So same idea. When we click and drag, though, we're going to see an arrow at the end, and we can manipulate the shape, the size, and the type of arrow that we use as well. We'll look at that a little bit later as well. Here's our oval button. We're going to be using this in one of the upcoming lessons for drawing circles and ovals. Here's our rectangle button. Same thing. We click and drag on the page to draw a rectangle. And then we've got down below some auto shapes. So these are shapes that have already been built for you, and kind of like the oval and the rectangle, you choose your auto shape and then you click and drag to draw it. So for example, if I wanted stars and banners and I wanted this 5-pointed star, I can click on it and then click and drag to draw my star. We'll look at those a little bit later as well. Then we've got bookmarks. Now these buttons down below, bookmark, design gallery object, and item from content library, are kind of grouped together. You're not so much drawing as selecting here and bookmarking a spot on your page. So that's the Objects toolbar. Now that we're familiar with the various buttons on the Objects toolbar, in the following lessons, we're going to work with some of these actual tasks.